بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين ما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're gathered here today to reflect and ponder over 365 days of constant bombing by the Zionist entity. Over 40,000 of our Palestinian brothers and sisters have lost their lives due to this genocide, which many of the world are ignoring, and unfortunately, many of the Muslim lands have conveniently ignored. Now, whilst we're contemplating and reflecting over the last year, I'm sure all of you, when October the 7th happened, and even when the bombardment started, were connected to the Palestinian cause even before. And as our brother mentioned, this conflict started when World War One, the British and the French conquered and colonized the Islamic lands and carved it up between two intelligent officers, Mark Sykes and General Paco Pico, in a room in Paris. Now, subhanallah al-azim, what can we do to support? Now, a lot of our brothers and sisters have been to Palestine, I'm sure. Just a raise of hands who have been to Palestine, just so I know. Alhamdulillah. And there's something about this blessed land that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned indirectly and directly in the Quran many times. Now, one thing I've noticed after my travels to Palestine, I've been about 3-4 times, and I could say the resolve, the patience is the strength of the Palestinians, even in Dafa Gharbiya. Now, I've been to Ramallah, I've been to Dhahiriya, and Dhahiriya, for those who know, is named after the great Mamluk commander Khalif Dhahir Baybars. And that was a military sort of camp that used to train the soldiers. So just knowing the defense of Palestine and the Ard al-Muqaddisa has started ever since the time that Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu conquered this blessed land. When he was on top of Jabal Mukabbir, looking over Quds with the noble companions. This blessed land has been rooted in our history ever since the time Ibrahim alayhi salam went to that land and subsequently the Anbiya thereafter. Now, the strength the Palestinians have is their ability that they have is to endure suffering and have patience with Allah's permission. Even the whole world, subhanAllah al-Azim, non-Muslims and Muslims alike, are at awe of how the Palestinians are enduring this genocide over the past 365 days. You see loved ones losing their children, babies, and they always praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. They always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most difficult times. And we always need to do this as well. Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. Living in the West, we have our luxuries. But where we have to remember that this conflict happened way before October the 7th. And if we go through the different attacks on Palestine or on Gaza in particular, let's go to 2006, Operation Summer Rains. Let's go into the bombings. If those who remember those children on the beach, do you remember when they were mercilessly slaughtered while playing on the beach? No, the world stayed silent. Then on top of that, we had Operation Hot Winter in 2008, way before October the 7th, 2023. Then we had the subsequent strikes and then led to Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012. Consistently, the Zionist entity has been attacking our brothers and sisters mercilessly, and our Muslim rulers have sat silent, observing this, whilst doing absolutely nothing. But where do I have an issue, especially with what we see today as far as charity is concerned? And I need to stress on this point because I have been to Egypt recently, 2 months ago, and we have a project called the Gaza Relief Egyptian Alliance, where we deal with Palestinian evacuees who have left Gaza and are now settling in Cairo. As you know, they don't have the right to many of the legitimate official documents that enable them to get into education and whatnot. And I could assure you, after speaking to these family members, over 20 family members we look after, and all they say is that we are not your bank balances, that you see our suffering and see pound, dollar, and yen. And they have related stories to me about how charities underdeliver, overpromise and underdeliver. And what I've noticed as well, subhanAllah al-Azim, and I think this is something that has to be noted, all of you here today feel pain and want to support the best way possible. So what do we naturally do? We look at our pockets and we say we want to give to the Palestinian cause and to alleviate their suffering to the best of our ability. And I'm sure everyone feels the pain and wants to support and donate. But what we have to understand is this, is that with the charity sector, in Islam, zakat, which is an ibadah, the third pillar of Islam is an ibadah. So when you give your money, you are doing it to seek closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whilst at the same time trying to alleviate the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Palestine or wherever it may be. But because we're focusing on our Palestinian brothers and sisters, it's only befitting that I relate what I saw in Cairo and elsewhere of the Palestinians who are left or left their hometowns, whether it's Khan Yunis, whether it's Shaja'iyya, whether it's Beit Hanun, whatever it may be. They all relay the same thing, that the charity sector come, they deliver, we ask of them to support us to the best of their ability, but then ultimately what happens is that there's so many different charities and there's no unified umbrella. We talk about uniting the ummah, right? And us living in the Western lands, we have an advantage living in the first world, right? We all are earning, we all have wealth, so we want to donate. But I like to ask, right? And let me ask you, generally speaking, how many of you really follow up your donations when you give? How much of you really follow up? So in the whole room, we only find a handful of brothers who really follow up. Now, the amount of charities, right, that are in the UK at present, the question I like to ask is, why isn't there no unified umbrella where charities get together and distribute aid in coordination, in unison? Why is that? Because I tell you why, and I'm going to say openly without any fear, gift aid is a huge incentive. Gift aid is a huge incentive. I ask you, since October the 7th, when you play your YouTube video, how many charities do you see pop up as a sponsored ad? Put your hands up. Loads. A new charity every other week, or probably that you've never heard of, a charity's requesting money. What about your Instagram post? Do you see sponsored ads on there as well? How much do you see? Loads. Facebook, how much do you see? Loads. Now, what's the problem here? There is no problem, generally speaking, but is the aid, is the money reaching them? So let's go back. We're talking about 365 days, right? Do you remember when Israel announced a blockade of aid going through the Rafah border? Does everyone remember that? Everyone remembers that, right? And what happened? There was aid, and I remember when I was in Cairo, and there was loads of Al Jazeera journalists that I was communicating with Instagram whilst I was in Cairo. So there's one called Anas al-Sharif. There's another martyr, cameraman who passed away recently, Ismail Hol. Do you remember him? The cameraman who passed away recently. I've been communicating with many, many others, Mahmoud Zakut, in Gaza. And you know what they said to me? They said that there's tons of trucks going for thousands of trucks going for miles from Gaza or Rafah all the way to Al Arish. Do you know how far that is? Tens of thousands of trucks piling up. And they only go in when the Israelis wanted to go in. So let me ask you, the amount of money since the start of the campaign in Gaza until this day now, ila yawmina hada, how much money do you reckon has been raised collectively from all the charities? If anyone wants to throw a ballpoint figure, tens of millions or hundreds of millions? What do you think? Tens of millions? Hands raised. Hundreds of millions, right? Hundreds of millions of pounds. Let's not talk about the UK charities. We talk about the diaspora in the West, in the Australias, in the Americas, in Europe. Hundreds of millions of pounds have been raised in this campaign. I promise you this. You know, this 100% donation policy that you hear day and night is no different to seeing a halal sticker on the window. I promise you that. Because 100% donation policy, gift aid, and going back into the aid convoys, when those trucks were stacking up, I was asking charities, I've spoken to them privately as well. I said, look, how much money have you raised? How much money have you spent? What's the plan? What's your strategic plans going forward? You know how much charities in the Middle East, you know, the Western charities are a needle in the haystack. The trucks that you see lining up, piling up, most of those charities that are operating are Middle Eastern charities. The marketing strategy from the West, and I'm not saying they're not delivering. What I'm saying is it's trickling of aid that's going in. And I assure you, 2.5 or the gift aid is about 25% of every donation you give. They can claim that whenever they want, every quarter, every, tax year, whenever they want. What's the solution here? Is it charity? No. Solution is not charity. The solution is that we need to raise awareness. And we have esteemed scholars or brothers are going to speak about this matter, that the solution for the ummah is that we need to create awareness of what's happening in Gaza. And you can see the impact that the Palestinian brothers, their steadfastness, many non-Muslims are embracing Islam. I'm sure you must have been aware of what's been happening across social media. But getting back to the charity sector, there's a verse in the Quran where Allah speaks about the 8 different categories of those who are entitled to zakat. And there's one category that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, which is wal amilun. Okay? The ones that work and collect the donations. Now, what we're finding is that many charities are operating assuming that they fall under this category, which they don't. If you go to the books of fiqh and you go to the books of the ulama, al-amilun is the one that one nasab al-imam. It is only when an imam allocates that to you. So zakat was always centralized with the dawla or the khilafah or the imara. It was never ever operated in our glorious history where NGOs independently were separate from the dawla or the khilafah or the imara. It was always centralized by the dawla. And you go to Ibn Abdul Barr, you go to Ibn Rushd, you go to all the different scholars across the four madahib. Even Ibn Abdul Barr in his Istithqar mentioned that the Ahnaf mentioned wal amilun is the one the imam appoints. Now what happens is, and this is many charities that are operating like this, they said, we're amilun. So now every charity that is opening in the West, they'll collect however much money that they collect and they'll declare themselves as وَالْعَامِلُونَ عَلَيْهَا, the ones that collect for it. So that gift or whatever, the zakat donation, if you know about the books of fiqh, zakat has to have an element of tamlik. He has to have possession. And it is not allowed to take from the zakat. No one can take from it. So what do? They take from the gift aid. Now the gift aid should really go back into the charity. That's what should happen. But yet we know they've got costs, they've got overalls, they've got expenditure. So if we have a clear objective and we have clear evidence that this is going to be spent accordingly, then we can have trust and we can have assurance that this money is being spent accordingly. Now, how many charities of the Charity Commission have found out that they've not carried out due diligence? I don't need to name charities. I've done videos on it, and anyone who's interested could go to the playlist. But what the end objective is, and this is going back to Gaza now, the end objective is that we don't want to be in a position that when we give zakat or we give sadaqah or we give lillah, that we should be content. No one should be content. You should follow up. Call your charities. Ask them what's happening with the donations. Because let me assure you, just because they say that they have teams on the ground, doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. And I could vouch for this because I'm speaking to Palestinians in Cairo. And they've said to me, there's a lot of foul play happening. So, moving forward, because it's about Gaza, I don't want to make it all negative. The attacks since October the 7th, when they started the campaign in November as such, do you know they have dropped more bombs on Gaza than World War II from the Allies? Do you know that? Do you know the statistics? So if you go into the reports here, it mentions that Israel has dropped more than 70,000 tons of bombs on the Gaza Strip since last November. And it surpasses, I'm sure everyone has been watching Piers Morgan, and a lot of the Muslim speakers have been going on, what's proportional and all. And that's what it is. If it was anyone else that was committing these atrocities, this conversation would not be happening. There would be a full-scale intervention. The UN would have had their Security Council meet up, and they would have went in similar to what they're doing in Ukraine, which is oppression, right? But why one rule for Ukraine and another rule for Palestine or Gaza or any other, even Syria, for example? Now, the Europe Medical Human Rights Monitor estimated that approximately 70,000 bombs have been dropped. And do you know, if you combine it with Dresden and what the Germans done in London and elsewhere, they only dropped 18,300. To think about, Gaza is how long? 20 miles by 5? If you want to go by the actual radius. London is bigger than Gaza. Yet the Germans dropped 18,300. The Israelis have dropped 70,000. Think about the proportion here. 40,000 dead. If this isn't a genocide, then I don't know what a genocide is. But it's not about whether it's a genocide according to the international community. It's who is suffering and who is on the other side of this particular bombardment. Now, I have full assurance that The victory will be with the mu'mineen at the end. And no one should despair. This is one particular point that I want to stress, that the victory would always be with the believers. Do not have any doubt about that. It will take time. There would be suffering. There would be oppression. The Ummah will go through so much tests and trials and tribulations. But we've been through these tests and tribulations in the past. When the Maghul came from the east, and Ibn Athir in his Kamil fi Tariq is penning this when he gets to the chapter of ثم ظهور Genghis Khan في ديار الإسلام في بلاد الإسلام. He said, and he was writing this, he said, I was so hesitant to write in this. My friends and my family encouraged me to write this. It's as if it was the death blow to Islam and the Muslim, the death blow. And he even went further and said, I am certain that this fitna, there will be no fitna like this until Masih al-Dajjal comes. Think about that for a second. And did the Ummah rise up? Did the Ummah rise up after that? Yes. Ain Jalut, 1258, 658 Hijri. The noble Mamalik, led by Saifuddin Qutuz, went against the odds. It was the last dar of Islam. Meaning, if they would have conquered Egypt, they had all the Islamic lands. Egypt was about to Shamal Africa, the northern African states. If they would have taken that, who knows what would have happened to Islam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave izzah and glory to Islam. Those who are muttaqeen, those who are samidun, those who are steadfast, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant them nasr. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That's fine. So I know we've got, as I mentioned before, esteemed speakers. So to summarize and to conclude, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests the believers, and He's tested those in the past. And 1 year in, subhanallah al-azim, this has shown us the hypocrisy of the world, as if we didn't know already. But it just further substantiated and highlighted that we can never ever trust those who scream and bang about human rights, those who bang about genocide, those who bang about, the International Criminal Court of Justice. Where's that? Where are the nation states? What has the International Criminal Justice, or whatever it's called, done for the Palestinians? Rather, it's just mere slogans. So in the end, like I said before, going back to the charity sector, I just urge you to please, please, please be mindful of when you donate, who you donate to, because like I said before, donating your zakat is ibadah. And you need to be mindful of who you donate to. And once again, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to protect us all, and to give nasr to the Palestinians, and to strengthen them, and to plant their foot firm against the adu. وآخر دعوانا والحمد لله.